You're all slack, you fucking moron!
Force will be with you, always.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Screen Share, a movie podcast about a fully armed and operational battle station. That's a horrible... I could do a better Palpatine than that, but I'm not going to. This is the episode. We're continuing our Star Wars and Fast and Furious series of reviews, and this is the final one of the first trilogies of the two. Return of the Jedi.
My name's Calder.
My name's Adam. Return of the Jedi. My name's Adam, and he's Calder. This is the third of the original trilogy of Star Wars films. And I'll say it off the top, my favorite.
All-time favorite Star Wars?
Here's the thing. That changes a lot, but I think Return of the Jedi is most consistently my favorite, which we'll get into. But let me give a brief rundown on what the film is. After facing insurmountable odds against the Empire and losing their dear friend Han Solo, Luke, Leia, and the others mount a rescue to save Han from the crime gangster Jabba the Hutt.
Get him back.
The Empire continues its plan to rule over the entire galaxy, with the Emperor himself overseeing the creation of a new Death Star.
Do it.
The rebellion has one chance to end the Empire once and for all, but with the looming threat of Darth Vader and the new revelation that he is Luke's father, Luke must decide what his fate must be.
Wow.
Was that Luke?
Yeah.
This is the thrilling conclusion to the Star Wars story as it was in the late 90s, or sorry, the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
I guess we'll just start off by saying, how do you think this movie stacks up?
I think it is the least good of the three.
Oh!
I think there's just like some stuff where it's like there's some really fun things and some cool things, but we're kind of fighting the same thing as the first movie.
Interesting.
The characters feel a little less like together, I guess, to me. It feels a little less like, I don't even know what it is. It's just like, I think coming off Empire, it's hard to recapture what that did. Mm-hmm. So then you watch this and you're like, okay, so it's another Death Star. Couldn't have thought of something else.
Yeah.
Or maybe just not done a Death Star and had them have to go after the Emperor.
Sure.
And then I think some of the effects aren't as good as well. And it's not like a special editions thing. It's like the effects at the time, where it's like, I think a lot of the Speed Racer stuff looks kind of bad.
Like the speeder bike stuff? Yeah, on Endor.
Like Speed Racer, you know Speed Racer?
I do think when watching, that was the first time that I was, like, throughout the whole trilogy, where I was like, these effects look a little dated.
Yeah.
I still don't think it looks bad, and, like, the sequence isn't too long, but, like, it definitely is the, like, it kind of, honestly, for me, shows how great everything else looks. That, like, that is, like, the one thing where it's like, that's a little wacky. Mm-hmm. And looks a little silly.
It feels a little bit like they hit something with Empire, but then got a little criticized for it being too dark. And then we're like, okay, we'll lighten it up and make it kind of the same thing as the first one. But I feel like it should be a more epic conclusion than it is like, but it's more of a fun adventure.
Interesting. Because I think it's a pretty epic conclusion. Here's my pitch on why I think this is like an incredible finale. As far as the Death Star thing goes, it's kind of like not really an important part of it in my mind. Like they only really do an attack on the Death Star for like a few minutes.
Yeah, but then it's like, why? Like, why even have it?
I think that's fair. But like I think it's more just like a tool to get the characters into like their places. But as far as like the movie as a whole, like you start off with the Jabba's palace stuff where they're trying to save Han. And I think that whole entire sequence is like from start to finish is so tense, and you don't really know what their plan is, and you don't really know if it's going wrong or not. It's just kind of like there is like this threat of like they are massively outnumbered and kind of in like dangerous territory here. And like there's so much mystery around Luke, and like he's clearly more powerful than he was before and like stronger, but like you're not really sure how or why. Like how powerful he is or like what that even entails. Like it's interesting to see Han in a place where like he's relying on those around him because he can't see and he just got out of like cryo freeze or whatever. So like he's in a weak position, which is not really a position we've seen him in before. Maybe aside from after he got tortured in Empire and he's like, I feel terrible or whatever. But I think the whole Jabba's palace and sail barge thing is very exciting and thrilling and really throws you into it like pretty quickly after like a fun build up. And then we briefly have Luke on Dagobah, and then it's kind of like that's like before the halfway point of the movie, and then the rest of the movie is kind of like at the third act. It's like the third act is basically half of the movie. And I feel like for a third act in a trilogy to be mostly third act, like it kind of works perfectly. And I think especially when it's like cutting between Lando and the space battle and Admiral Akbar and all them, and then cutting to the surface of Endor with like Han, Leia, and like the crew like trying to get the shield generator down, and then also in the throne room with the Emperor, Vader, and Luke. It's like cutting. I talked in the Empire episode about how like when you cut away from one like group to like look at what's happening with the next, you're not like bummed at any point because the other like thing you're switching to is just as exciting. And I feel like that is the most true in like the final bit of this film, where it's like I'm never like, oh, I wanted to see the rest of that scene play out. Why are we with Lando now? It's more like, oh shit, what's going on in this space battle? Oh, that like it's actually a trap. It's a trap. It's a like trap, and like they have to like just kind of buy time until the shield generator goes down, but they're kind of like pinned between a fleet of Star Destroyers and the Death Star. And like it just feels like the whole finale is like nonstop action. And I think it handles it really well. And as for like the characters, like I feel like, yeah, there's not as much character development in this movie as there was in Empire, but I feel like there's a lot of like, in the first movie, like they're meeting each other, we're getting to know them. In the second movie, we're like seeing their relationships grow and expand. And in this movie, it's like we're seeing them at their like, they all know each other. They all love each other. They all will do anything for each other. Like they are the best of friends. Like we kind of see them in that. They all trust each other and understand each other and all this. There's still character development, obviously, like with finding out Leia is his sister and then like telling Leia, and she like has kind of a breakdown and all this. But like, I feel like, yeah, it's a bit more fun than Empire, but I don't think it loses the like darker tones entirely. I think it's just a bit more balanced out. Anyway, that's kind of my...
I think that makes sense. But there is a part of me that just like, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm just like, you know, like that's such a bad thing to say, but it's just like, it just didn't really work. It doesn't really work for me, where I'm just kind of like, okay, like it is mostly like a third act kind of thing, but I don't really care. I feel like we accomplished a lot in the last one.
Yeah.
And for there even to be a movie to follow it up, I'm like, it's got to be really good. Like it's got to feel like it has a real purpose.
Yeah.
Whereas like I feel like this movie is kind of like we made the third Star Wars rather than like this is a story that needs to be told about like about like the galaxy and these characters.
Interesting.
Just because like there's no, I guess the only thread that you're kind of like wondering about is what's going to happen with Luke and Vader.
Yeah.
And also like, I guess what happens with Han.
Yeah.
But Han is sorted out very quickly. In a nice, it's like a great part of the movie. I think the Jabba's Palace stuff is really cool.
Yeah.
Also a great level in Lego Star Wars.
Yeah.
And then there's just a lot of stuff between that and then the other question that we have, which is what happens with Luke and Vader. And that's obviously going to happen at the end of the movie.
I mean, can I push back on it a little bit?
Sure.
I feel like there's not like a lot of stuff between that. I feel like there's a lot of stuff between is that. Like we're seeing Luke go to Dagobah and be like, I gotta finish my training, and Yoda's like, I'm old as fuck. Let me die, please.
Yeah.
And which I think is like great, but then like Luke pushes and eventually Yoda is like, yeah, he's your dad, and like you get that confirmation. Because I feel like if you don't, because apparently, especially at the time, like they did some like test audience stuff. And, like, especially among kids, but also among, like, adults, like, people just thought Vader was lying. Like, they did not believe that he was actually Luke's dad. They were just like, he's probably just lying to, like, trick him.
Nice.
And, like, that was kind of the general consensus for the most part. So they kind of had to put that Yoda scene in there because people trust Yoda. So for him to be like, yeah, your father, he is, kind of like have that confirmation, and then have Luke be like, then I can't kill him then.
Yeah.
And have have Yoda and Obi-Wan both be like, you gotta, and he's like, I can't actually. And have Ben come back and be like, well, then the Emperor's already won. Or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know what relevance that had. I think I just wanted to say that line probably.
Okay.
But I mean more like, I think there's that, and then Luke rejoins like Han and Leia and the Rebels, and he like is like, I'll go with you on this mission. But then he senses Vader's presence, and he's like, oh shit, I'm like endangering you guys by being here. And like talks to Leia about how he has to confront Vader to like convert him basically. And then I think one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is when Vader and Luke are kind of on that like bridge between like the AT-AT walker and like the like landing pad or whatever after he turns himself in, because it's just like a lot of Luke being like, you're a good guy, and Vader being like, no, I'm not. And then he's like, I think you might be a good guy. And it's like, sorry, Luke, I'm like not. And that's like, especially when Luke is like, I believe that like Anakin Skywalker is still alive and it's not just Darth Vader. And Vader's like, it's too late for me, son. Like that line is basically like the first time that he's like, yeah, he's called Luke's son before, but it's usually just like, come on, son, join me. But like, that's the first line where it's like, he is talking to Luke as his dad and being like, it's like, I'm lost. Like I'm sorry. There's no chance for me. Like it's too late. But Luke like goes with them anyway. I don't know. I feel like the whole movie is kind of setting up like that is like the series is obviously kind of driving towards that the whole time, but like I feel like the whole movie is kind of just like really focused on setting up Luke and his conflict of like, if I fuck this up, it could like end the galaxy in a way, but at the same time, I believe that there's like redemption for my father and him pushing for that. So I feel like that's like the through line. And like, actually, I guess I'll just say kind of my general analysis here. But like, I think the whole film is like about redemption as a whole, like not just for Luke and Vader, but like obviously Darth Vader's redeemed through the efforts and commitment of his son. Although in the end, it's still like his choice to make. Like, yeah, Luke redeemed him, but like ultimately, like Luke is being electrocuted by the Emperor at the end. Vader's got to be the one to be like it's not like Luke is able to be like, redeem. It's like Vader has to be the one to be like, I'm realizing now what is more important, regardless of everything I've done in the past. It's still his decision. Han Solo also redeems himself because, like, when we meet him, he's like cocky, selfish, cares about no one but himself, only cares about money. But in this film, like, over and over, we see him put others first. Like, I think it's best, like, shown when Leia and Luke have their little conversation and Luke reveals that Leia's his sister and then leaves. Han comes out and he's like, what's wrong? And she's like, I need to be alone. And he's like, come on, tell me. And she's like, I can't. And he's like, what, so you can tell Luke, but you can't tell me? And like, that's a shade of like his older self. And then he starts to walk away and then he like stops himself and like goes back and is like, I'm sorry. Like, what can I do? And like, she's just like, hold me. And he's like, okay. And it's like, there's a lot of moments throughout the movie like that where he's putting himself aside, which like we don't see in A New Hope. We see a little bit in Empire, but it's kind of mostly through necessity. Like he kind of has to. But it's like very much his choice in this one. And then the through line through the whole trilogy is hope and like sacrifice and loss and like deciding what's worth fighting for. Anyway, I'm getting away from myself. But I just think that like the Vader redemption, it's not just like a thing that's at the end, in my opinion. I think it's something that's like they're building it throughout the whole thing.
I know what you mean by that. And I don't think it is just a thing that's at the end. But I think like the journey to that is just like, it's just not my favorite of the three. It's just like, we're on Endor, the planet's pretty cool, but like we're kind of just fucking around. And I just like, I'm just watching and I'm like, okay, I feel like there's not a lot of like narrative drive here. I know what's happening. I know like what the problem is, but I'm just kind of sitting here waiting for it to either happen or not happen.
I do think that like this movie more than Empire has like down moments where it's like, this is happening, and now we're kind of like, waiting a sec, and now this is happening, and then we're kind of taking a minute, and now this is happening, and then in the end, then it's kind of there's always something happening, whereas like Empire is kind of like the whole time something's always happening. So I do agree with that, but I think that the movie as a whole, like, yeah, it's like a fun adventure, but I feel like it's like a very thrilling conclusion. Like I think it's like, if you look at like Harry Potter, how like some people say that the last movies are their favorite, but like most people don't, just because like it's kind of just all finale. But like the way that is like it encapsulates itself, or like the way that shows itself is it's just kind of like nonstop. And it just feels like they're like the final movie, like Deathly Hallows Part 2, just feels like it feels like only final battle kind of stuff. And it's like you kind of need a bit more. I feel like this movie balances it a bit more. I don't know. Maybe we can get into specifics and revisit. I feel like we're kind of already in the debate portion.
I guess.
So like
I'm watching and I'm like, okay. Like that's just my reaction the whole time. It's just like, okay, not like I want to be in this world and like I love these characters and all that stuff. Sure. It doesn't like it just doesn't do that for me. Sure. It's just like, and I think part of it is just like, from my perspective, the movie feels like it's trying to be like, look at how great Star Wars is. You guys like Star Wars too, huh? Where it's just like a bunch of celebrations about things and like talking about how cool things are.
What do you mean by that?
I think it's just like one of the things that I felt was like a little meta was just how the Ewoks, these like almost incapable little furry boys, are just absolutely ass blasting the stormtroopers.
Yeah, because they're like feral. Yeah.
But they're not, though. They're not biting people. They just have little sticks and they poke the stormtroopers and they die. And it's like kind of just a silly little thing.
I mean, that's
like,
more because they're wearing armor. They were going to eat Han and Luke.
Sure.
But yeah, I get what you mean. Though.
They didn't, though.
Sure.
I don't know. It's just like, I'm just kind of like, okay. Like, I don't even know how to describe this. But I was watching and I was like, there's like 3 parties. It feels like there's like, they have like kind of a party with the Ewoks for sure.
Yeah, at the very end, yeah.
But isn't there like they're having like a fire and like bonfire part with them, right?
Well, there's like a period where like 3PO is like filling the Ewoks in on like what has happened to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I felt like that part was just 3PO being like telling the audience like, "Oh, listen to this cool adventure that we once did."
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of like an interesting thing. But I was just kind of like, the thing about this movie is I don't know how to describe the fact that it makes me feel almost nothing.
Interesting.
Where it's like, I get all of the character things that you said and the reasons why you like it, and I'm not trying to say that those are wrong or anything.
Yeah, you're allowed to have a different opinion. Yeah.
But I'm just kind of like, I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, let's get through it. You know, it just feels so much less entertaining to me.
Interesting.
And I don't particularly know why.
Okay.
This is like,
I don't really know how to like talk about it when I don't know what exactly the...
So like, we do the Jabba thing.
Sure.
Right? The whole time I'm like, okay, this is like a really cool scene. But there's no wonder that I'm getting from that. I'm like, this is like a cool thing. And Luke comes in and he's like already kind of a badass. And I'm like, okay, I guess. He's progressed a lot between the 2 movies. Fun. They save them. I'm kind of like, cool. I don't understand how Sarlacc pits torture, because if they're getting digested for 1,000 years, they're going to die earlier than 1,000 years. So
probably, yeah.
So it's just like,
I think it's more saying like your body will like be digested.
You're not going to heaven.
Yeah.
And that's all good and fine. I feel like such a fucking idiot being just like, yeah.
It's bad because bad.
No, it's not bad.
Sorry, I
though.
don't mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm just watching it and I'm like, it's just not really what I want out of this conclusion. I think I like the character journeys that happen, but I don't like the whole framing of them, where it's like, okay, they're building another Death Star. That's cool. It's a little part of it, but also like, why is that a part of it?
Yeah. I think the main I do think like there being a second Death Star is my least favorite part of this movie. I do think that the second Death Star looks cooler than the main Death Star. Something about it being under construction is really cool. But like, I do think that like its general existence is kind of like one of the lesser good parts of this movie. Yeah. And I think like, I think it could work if like the characters treated it a bit more seriously, like when they're talking about it in like the like on the ship where they're like planning and they're being like, the Death Star is right here, it's orbiting the moon planet of Endor, blah blah blah, or the forest moon of Endor, and like the shield generators on there, and they're like planning it. No one's like, there's another one. How'd they make another one? Like, I feel like you need the characters to be like, this is like really bad, because like when they're learning about the Death Star in the first one, everyone's like, this is horrible, This is like really bad. Like we really need to do something. Where, as in this one, they're like, yeah, I guess we'll assemble a strike team. And it's like, okay, I feel like this should be treated with a bit more like, how in the world did they make another one so fast? Like,
yeah, so like...
And I guess they could be calmer because they're under the impression that it's not done.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like getting ahead of it.
Yeah, they have a little more time, I guess.
But then it turns out they're not actually getting ahead of it. They don't have more time.
So like, there's that. And I'm like, okay, another Death Star, another thing to blow up.
Yeah.
Cool. Not a huge issue.
Sure.
Right? It's just
whatever.
a bit of a thing where it's like, maybe we could do something else. I think it's just... It kind of has a bit of a Last Jedi thing where it's just so tied to like this one place where it's Endor and the sky and the space above Endor, where I'm just kind of like, when I'm watching one of these, I like going to different places, doing different things, and like having that experience. And I don't particularly care for or like the Ewoks very much.
Interesting.
Not that I dislike them, but I'm just like...
I'll have to address that
just
in a moment.
neutral about them.
Sure.
Where I'm just like, okay, it's just kind of a little character. And they're making some noises, and that's fine. And they're like, whatever. Like, they're literally just such a whatever thing to me. The best thing about them is that they're cute.
Sure. Okay.
I don't particularly like find the space stuff all that riveting. And then Luke's journey just takes a long time for me. And I think the climax of that, where he's battling Vader and the Emperor, and they're like finally getting the shield down and finally blowing up the Death Star and all that stuff, I think that's very good. But it's just like the journey.
You think
to
it
get
takes too
there,
long to get there?
I guess that's a bit of it. Like, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, let's fucking hurry this up. Like, what are we doing? Like,
fair.
I feel like we're just pissing around. And I'd like to rank it at the bottom of the list.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Let me address your Ewoks thing. So one of my notes is the Ewoks are so damn good, and then I have another thing that says the Ewok haters are stupid. So this is kind of where I'm coming from, just so you're aware.
Yeah, I know.
I think that the Ewok hate is kind of like, not that I'm saying you're saying you hate the Ewoks, but like, I think like,
there are people who violently hate them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think in general, like, the dislike for the Ewoks, I think, is kind of misguided, because like, I think they're kind of like shrugged off, because it's like, oh, they're just kind of like a cute character that's there to be cute, and like, it's goofy that they are like beating the stormtroopers. Like, how would they ever beat the stormtroopers? But like, the reason I love the Ewoks is obviously cute, get that out of the way, but like, I think that it's so interesting to like go to this planet where the Empire is like relying on, like, they're like relying on this shield generator being okay, and they just like built it on this moon, and they did not even consider the primitive life that's living there and like the native life that's there. So like, to me, there's something really cool about the Empire ultimately in a way being defeated by like not considering what they would consider an insignificant creature. But like, because they're unprepared for that, they just get overwhelmed because it was just a non-consideration to them. And I don't know. Another reason I love the Ewoks is like, we see a lot of creatures throughout Star Wars, but the Ewoks, more than any of them, we get to like see into their culture.
We spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah. Like, we get to see like their home. We get to see like, we get to see them like sing and dance, and like how they organize like a feast, and then we see them like how like their what would it call it, like their methods of like their innovations of like using logs in the trees and shit to destroy these walkers and like throwing rocks. But I also love how like some of it doesn't work. Like there's an Ewok that flies over an ATST and just drops a rock on it. And it's like, that's not doing anything. Yeah. Like a bunch of them are trying to trip it with a rope. And it's like, that's just going to drag you guys. You guys are like 5 pounds. They're probably more than 5 pounds. But it's just like, but then also they're like swinging logs and crushing them. And like one of the Ewoks, Poplu, like steals a speeder bike.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
And is like... like takes like 3 out of the 4 scout troopers away and makes it so much easier. But like even the heroes are like, oh fuck, these stupid little creatures are gonna mess this up for us. And it's like, no, you're kind of like similar to the Empire. You're like kind of not giving these guys enough credit.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's like a really interesting thing to do. I'm kind of honestly bummed that the Ewoks kind of never return in any other kind of media for the most part.
What about the holiday special?
They're not in the holiday special.
Oh, really?
The Wookiees are in the holiday special. Which actually, speaking of, originally they were going to make it a Wookiee planet. And then they decided not to do that.
There you go.
But
I think my thing with the Ewoks is just like... I don't care. Where it's like you care about Star Wars and the things and the like races and like characters in the background.
Sure.
Like you are a fan of Star Wars. When I'm watching this movie, I'm like, all right, I'd like to get back to what's going on. I don't really care about the rituals of the little teddy bears.
Sure.
And it's fun and cool, but I just don't have that like desire to see the full cultures of other alien races in the foreground so much.
Oh yeah. I do think that like, and I'm not accusing you of this specifically, but I do think that in general, some people aren't willing to admit the Ewoks are cool because they're cute. And it's like cute things can't be cool too. But like, I think the Ewoks are like so cool. Like, I think they're like their design is so like incredible, but also the fact that like seeing them like smash stormtroopers with rocks and shit, and just like, I don't know. I feel like they don't get the credit they deserve just because they're cute, and that kind of like, I think to some people like devalues their like cool qualities, which I think is kind of unfair. Yeah. But anyway. We can move on from Ewoks. It's fine if you think Ewoks are mid. I think it's a bad take.
This is tense. This is the tensest episode so far, especially after Tokyo Drift didn't go number 1 on the list.
It's true. Yeah, that was a tough debate on that one. Let me talk about the movie itself for a minute. So, Irvin Kershner, who directed Empire Strikes Back, was invited to come back to direct. But he said no, because he basically spent a lot of time making Empire, and he was like, I kind of don't want to spend that much time again.
That took like 18 months or something, right?
It took a long time. I mean, he spent 3 years like in production, pre-production, and like filming and like being a part of the editing process. So he was like, yeah, I don't really want to do that again. Apparently George Lucas wanted Steven Spielberg to do it. But that didn't come to fruition.
That would have been cool.
It would have been cool. It would have been awesome, and he probably would have done an incredible job.
I think he's good with like little things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Lucas also wanted David Lynch.
That would have been insane.
Yeah. He also wanted David Cronenberg.
That would have been psychotic.
But ultimately they went with Richard Marquand, who had like directed some of the second unit stuff. Or sorry. No, he'd done other movies. George Lucas directed some of the second unit stuff, which he'd done with other stuff as well. Apparently, like, people didn't love Richard Marquand on set. A lot, like, he had feuds with like a few of the actors.
Incredible.
Like, apparently he made Carrie Fisher cry at one point. Apparently he had like a lot of issues with Anthony Daniels, who played 3PO, and there was just like a lot of stuff like that, which kind of sucks, but like, oh well, they made the movie. I don't know what that means, but
Yeah.
it just kind of sucks that happens on movies sometimes. Lawrence Kasdan wrote this one as well with George Lucas after writing the last one, which I think is where a lot of what I'm saying is good about the movie comes through. Like, I do think that, like, the dialogue and the characters are still, like, they're still strong, and kind of, like, carry the large parts of this movie. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here's the other thing I was going to say about the production. So they initially like had problems testing the showings of the movie in theaters because like the sound effects were mixed in a way that like in theaters that didn't have like surround sound and stuff, like you could just like not hear some of the dialogue.
Nice.
Or like the music would be overpowered by the sound effects or something like that. So George Lucas created THX, like the sound or the audio company, so that he could like basically make it so that theaters could play the movie the way it's meant to be played, which like that's just another thing of like there was a problem, so George Lucas started one of the most legendary companies in Hollywood or like all of these things, like, and he also started Industrial Light and Magic for these movies, which ILM is like one of the leading like special effects studios in the world. It's just like stuff like that.
Fucking crazy.
The movie was originally called Return of the Jedi, but then like Richard Marquand and like some other people on the movie were like, the title doesn't really suggest excitement. It should be something else. So George Lucas changed it to Revenge of the Jedi.
What?
Yeah.
That doesn't really make any sense.
And then so that was still the title when they like started merchandising the film a little bit, like to lead up to the film. And then George Lucas was basically like, I don't think I like this title. He was basically like, a Jedi shouldn't seek revenge.
Yeah.
So like that doesn't really make any sense. So he reset it to Return of the Jedi. But they'd already printed almost 7,000 posters.
Nice.
Of Revenge of the Jedi. So what George Lucas did is he sold them to the Star Wars fan club for $9.50 a piece, which is kind of fun. Just to be like, these are useless. Let's just give them to the fans, I guess.
I wonder what those are worth now.
Probably a lot. I've seen some people who own one of those posters.
Yeah. Are they cool?
They're like pretty cool. It's basically like Vader's face and then them fighting in front of it. It's like a basic poster, but like it's more just cool that it's like this poster was before the title change or whatever. Anyway, the movie was successful. It had a budget of $32 to $42 million, so
which is around the same as the second one.
Yeah,
ended up being.
Yeah. Which I feel like after the second one, they were probably like, okay, like fine. These movies keep making money. Yeah, you can have a decent budget. And the movie ended up making $482 million, which is a little bit of a success.
Almost as much as Tokyo Drift.
Almost.
They're so close.
Roger Ebert, because here's the thing, as far as like critic responses, like Rogers is the only one that I'm gonna like highlight.
Did people generally like the movie though?
People generally liked the movie. I think that like there was and still kind of is a feeling that like some of the choices made for the movie were to support the merchandising. Like there's a big accusation is that like the Ewoks only exist for toys. Which, like, whether that's true or not, I still like the Ewoks, but, like, That's like kind of like an accusation that's thrown out there.
Yeah.
But like people generally liked the movie, thought that it was like a great conclusion. But I think that overall people tend to think that it's the worst of the three.
Yeah. It's like the 1C, you could say.
Sure. I wouldn't say that. But like
I know.
we'll
I
get
said
to
you could.
Well, you said I could, and I'm saying I couldn't because I disagree.
Oh, well.
Roger Ebert at the time gave it 4 out of 4 stars, calling it a complete entertainment, a feast for the eyes, and a delight for the fancy. It's a little amazing how Lucas and his associates keep topping themselves, is what he said. Which is kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that they topped Empire as far as like quality of movie, but I think they topped it as far as like excitement and like pure entertainment, which it doesn't sound like you agree with, but that's okay. Anyway, so what was your favorite part of this film specifically?
I think the last lightsaber fight, the conclusion of like the Vader, Emperor, Luke thing.
Everything in the throne room is so good.
Yeah. I think that's like incredible Star Wars.
Yeah. And the fact that like the Emperor is kind of set up in the first like scene of the movie when Vader shows up on like the Death Star and like meets up with Jar Jarrod,
Of
is
course.
the officer's name. Anyway, and he's like basically like, yeah, we're working on making this thing operational. And Vader's like, well, you better hurry up because the Emperor's coming. And he's like, what? It's impossible to do what he asks. And he's like, well, the Emperor's coming here. He's going to come here to oversee it. And then he's like, I guess we'll just double our efforts, which is kind of like a manager being like, just do it faster when someone's like, I genuinely can't do it in that time. But apparently they do it in the time. So they were doo-doo. But Vader sets up the Emperor basically by saying that the Emperor is not as forgiving as I am.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yikes.
we literally saw you have zero forgiveness in the last film. We know you for not being forgiving.
Yeah.
So setting him up to be that, and then when you see him just being like this feeble old man who's like, right? So
That's perfect.
thank
actually.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is it the same guy playing the Emperor in the prequels?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
There was actually when Olivia and I were watching, we watched Empire. And I was like, so that hologram is actually Ian McDiarmid like filmed that when he did Revenge of the Sith. And she was like, oh, cool. And I was like, yeah, it was originally just like some random guy on the makeup team or something. And then we were watching Return of the Jedi, and she was like, I kind of wish they got this guy back to do it. And I was like, to do what? And she was like, to do the prequels. Like, I wish that, why didn't they just get this guy to come back and be Palpatine in the prequels? And I was like, they literally did.
It's just a wildly different character.
Yeah, she was just like, she was like, wait, but I thought you said that they did him in the Empire. And I was like, no, they did. They just did it then. But like, they did recast him at then. And she was like, okay. But like,
I understand why she didn't fully understand you, though, if you told her like that.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I do wonder, like, if people knew, like, very clearly when like Phantom Menace came out. I wonder if people were like, he played the Emperor, so like that's obviously the Emperor. Or if
I mean, they
people
also
piece that
call him
together or
like
not.
Emperor Palpatine.
Well, they call him Palpatine, but
Yeah.
like they don't really call him Palpatine in this movie.
Really?
I don't think so. I think maybe once, or if at all. I don't know.
Yeah.
They mostly just call him the Emperor. Anyway, but I think that, yeah, the whole throne room thing is so good. Like, Luke seems so strong-willed going into it, and then like is slowly broken down by the Emperor, and like he just knows how to get at him. And then when the lightsaber fight starts and like the Emperor's cackling in the background, it's just like so exciting. And I think the whole fight is exciting, but I think really like somewhat peak Star Wars for me is when Vader basically is like, when Luke's hiding and Vader's like, oh, it seems you've got a sister, I just realized by probing your mind. And he's like, if you won't turn, perhaps she will. And like Luke yells like, never, which like should be corny, but the way he yells it just is so like, it's so much raw emotion. And then like the music of like, or whatever, as he's like fucking wailing on Vader. It's just like so raw and so violent. And I feel like that to me is like, and then like that leading into him cutting off Vader's arm or hand and seeing like he's got a mechanical hand. I also have that. So like really what is different between him and me? Like, yeah, maybe he's more machine than man, but like I'm also a bit machine. Like there's like, we're kind of one and the same. Like that emotion leading into that like revelation is kind of like, to me, the peak of what Star Wars is. And like, so fucking good.
Yeah. I think that's a great scene where it's like, and I think the lightsaber fight is great. The electricity is like a great little twist, and you're like, oh fuck, you can do that with the Force?
That was one thing where Olivia was like, is that like a special edition effect? And I was like, no, that was just the shit of the time. And it's kind of impressive. Like seeing it like crackle up his body and like highlight his teeth and shit. It's like very cool. And
then the Emperor getting, definitively killed by Vader.
Yes.
At the end there is
killed for sure 100%.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I mentioned where I'm like, that's the hardest thing to be like to forget the other stuff.
Yeah.
Which I remember literally when I saw the trailer for Rise of Skywalker and you hear the Emperor's like laugh, I was like, they ruined it. I was like, unless they handle this perfectly in some way, like them bringing him back in any capacity immediately takes away from this.
Yeah.
Which is like, even if you make dog shit Star Wars movies, whatever, do your thing, you cannot make Star Wars movies that lessen the impact or the quality of the originals. That is a crime. Jar Jar Abrams. The amount of times that we were watching the originals and then would be like, fucking insane how good this is, and then how this happened in the sequels. Olivia would just go, fucking Jar Jar Abrams, and I thought that was funny. Anyway, yeah. But like, we're judging it. He definitively died. In the special editions, I don't know if it was in yours, did Vader, when he killed the Emperor, did he say no?
Yeah, he was
no. Like, yeah, so that wasn't in the original. Originally, he just like is looking back and considering, and then he just picks him up and throws him, which like I could do with like one no in there or none, but having him go no and then picking him up, it's like Palpatine could easily like hear that and look over and be like, oh, he's gonna fuck with me, and then just like like it's just kind of silly. You don't need him to say no to realize what he's considering there. It's just silly. But so good. Having that final decision moment and sacrificing
Vader getting
himself
redeemed
for his son.
Yeah. I think it's a great conclusion.
Yeah.
And it ties the whole original trilogy up.
Yeah.
I think, replaying the movie in my head a little bit, I think my only problem is like directing feels a bit weak. Where you're kind of just like, it's a little bit of a New Hope syndrome where it's kind of like there's stuff in here, but like I don't think I'm getting it.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same with the Fast and the Furious where you're like, there is some great stuff between these things and there's some undeniable parts for sure.
Sure.
But I'm like, the stuff in between the lines is not popping out to me.
Yeah.
So like the reason I think the speeders look kind of bad is because they're just like essentially still in the middle of the frame.
Yeah.
Right? Like if the camera was shaking or moving with them, then you're more into it. But it's like this fast background and this is just like one
and them just like
yeah.
It's
just like one of the choices where I'm just like, fuck, like that could have been like the coolest fucking thing ever.
Yeah.
But it's kind of lame because you're clearly just watching someone sit.
Which I will say, also one of the worst Lego Star Wars levels consistently. I feel like whenever they do an Endor speeder thing, it's just you shooting, like, pew, 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 as you're going forward. But yeah, I get what you mean, especially seeing Irvin Kershner kind of be like the perfect like usher for Empire. It's like Richard Marquand did like a fine job. Like the movie's good. Yeah. Like it's great, but like you can kind of tell that, especially if they got Kershner back, but like if they just got a somewhat stronger director to kind of like squeeze the squeeze the life out of the movie, and I meant like get the life out of the movie, not squeeze it out of the movie.
Bring
like
the movie
make
to
it
life
lifeless.
a little more.
Yeah, that's the better way of saying what I was saying. That was bad.
So I think it's just like that, where it's like you have this connection to it that is a little more emotional, a little deeper, and as more of a Star Wars fan. And I'm watching this as like, and not saying that you didn't try to do this, but it is like hard to separate, where you're like, I'm just watching this as like a guy watching a movie, and there's some stuff in the movie where it's just like, this is not grabbing me because it's just like poorly presented in a way.
Yeah. I do want to clarify that I think that this movie is good in relation to the other two specifically. Okay. Like, I think that it's like, it feels like, I mean, it kind of feels like like they got a good setup, and then they like got the meat of the story, and then this is like a satisfying conclusion, but like it does have less meat. But like it's not necessarily because it's worse, it's more just because like they're wrapping up what's already been set up. Yeah. I guess. Like there's lost what I was saying.
All right. There it is.
I do want to briefly talk about Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor. Because he was originally not cast. They were originally getting some other like older actors, but then even when he was cast, they were going to do a Darth Vader type situation and like dub his voiceover with the guy who did him like for the one hologram scene originally. Yeah. They were just going to have him dub the voiceover and just have Ian McDiarmid be the like physical part. But basically Richard Marquand told him that and was like, but if you get your voice like pretty close to his voice, then like they'll probably keep your voice in the movie if it's like close enough. And then Ian McDiarmid was like, cool, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna do what I think this character calls for. So he put a lot more like drama and like into it. Like, I don't know how to describe it.
He's more
that.
like a monster. Like an alien.
Yeah. And like apparently it was just so good that like George Lucas and all of them were like, fuck, I guess we'll just make this the character now. Which is a good choice because he's insane. Yeah. It's like how in Rise of Skywalker, I hate that the Emperor's in there. He shouldn't be in there. I think it's dumb. I think the reasoning they give is dumb mostly because it's no reasoning. But like everything about it is dumb. But like Ian McDiarmid kills it.
He's got his little area though, where he does his little his little Sith things.
What, in Rise of Skywalker? Yeah, sure.
And he's got all of the Death Star guns.
Let's not talk about that. I'm more saying like, even though it's dumb that he's there, and even though it makes no sense, and even though I hate that he's there, when he's speaking, I'm like, that's him. Yeah. Which honestly makes it worse that he's in there, because then I'm like, great, I can't just be like, that's a different guy.
The other thing that I like really don't like is that they put Hayden Christensen.
Oh yeah, that's a special edition change, yeah. Or not even a special edition change. I think that's a DVD release change.
It's just like do you know George
Lucas's reasoning?
Why?
He said that because originally it was Sebastian Shaw, who I want to talk about it in a minute as like Vader with mask off. But originally it was him, which makes sense. But then he changed it to be Hayden Christensen as he appears in Revenge of the Sith, which like his explanation is that he appeared as a Force ghost in the form that he was when he was last good, which makes no sense because the whole point is that he's redeemed. So he's good at the end.
Yeah.
So he should appear as he appeared at the end. Like, that's just what makes sense.
Like, maybe just as not fucked up fully.
Yeah, which is what it was originally. It was just him with hair and, like, looking fine.
Like, there's no connection between the guy you see when the mask comes off and Hayden Christensen.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, you have to have the knowledge that, like, you have to have watched the prequels, basically,
exactly,
to understand that.
If you haven't seen the prequels, you're like, who the fuck is that guy?
Yeah.
If you're Luke, you're like, who the fuck is that guy? Like, maybe he knows because the Force he knows, but, like, he'd be like, oh, that guy's, like, younger than I am.
Yeah.
It's just a
like,
stupid decision, and it makes no sense.
And it's all those, like, celebrating scenes after where they go to, like, the different planets and stuff.
Yeah.
Is that a special edition thing?
I think, yes. Well, I know that, like, a lot of it is. I think maybe in the original they showed, like, Cloud City and Tatooine. Maybe. Although I'm pretty sure, like, most, if not all of that was added after. I do like that they do that. Because it's like...
I just think some of it looks, like, actually horrible.
Oh, yeah. Some of it looks bad. I mean...
Yeah.
When we were watching it, I was literally like, I do like that they added this. It's cool to see the galaxy celebrating and, like, all of these locations we've been. But one of them they show is Naboo, which is only in the prequels, and they have have a Gungan on a roof celebrating, and he goes, "We so free!" And it's like, you just Jar Jar-ified Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And it's like, why?
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, some of the changes are fine, but there's, like, so much shit that should not be in there.
Yeah. It's very annoying.
But yeah. Anyway, back to Ian McDiarmid. I think he's just so good. I think, like, his face, especially when he's, like, lightninging Luke, it's like the way he's like putting his hole into it. He's putting his hole into it. He's putting it into his hole. Sorry, that's not. My favorite line from him is when he goes, "Oh, I'm afraid the shield generator will be quite operational when your friends arrive." And it's like, what is that reading? He's like making fun of Luke by being like, "Oh, boo-hoo." And it's just like, he's like so campy in, like, the perfect way. I think he's so good. He nails it. And I think he's great. Moving on to Sebastian Shaw as Vader with mask off. I love that, like, he removes the mask and it's like just this, like, fucking ball sack of a man. Mm-hmm. And he's just like this old, weak, frail. Like, there's so much, like, gentleness in his eyes, and it's like, this is the guy. This is the guy that's been, like, literally the worst man in the whole galaxy.
Maybe the second worst.
Yeah. But, like, that's the thing, though. Palpatine's easily worse, but, like, Palpatine isn't the one doing stuff. Like, Vader's the one going around and doing horrible shit, you know?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, that we see, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, the Emperor's really sending Vader out to do his bidding.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's Palpatine's bidding, but, like, Vader is the one who, like, everyone sees being a horrible man. And, like, to see him just be kind of this frail old man and just be like, just express, like, joy to, like, look at Luke with his own eyes and, like, being like, tell your sister you were right about me. And, like, it's such a short amount of time. Whenever I watch it, I'm like, oh shit, he already died. Mm-hmm. Like, he gets, like, 3 sentences out and he's done.
Cooked.
Then Luke goes back to Endor and burns his body, which is fine. Something Olivia pointed out is she's like, why'd he put the mask back on him?
Yeah, it's kind of silly.
It's a little weird because it's like, don't you want to see him as your dad? I guess he didn't want to see his dad's face, like, light on fire and his skin melt away. But
when
like,
I cremate you, I'm gonna look you right in the eyes.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome. What else do you got?
just I know I've said this every time. I think the explosions in this whole trilogy look so good.
Yeah.
Like the explosion of the fucking like Jabba's sail barge looks so good. So many like little flares going off and little chunks of metal because like them actually blowing up the miniatures. Same with like the big radar dish on Endor. I think like I don't know. I just think it's so good. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Leia's when Luke tells Leia that she's his sister, and she's like processing the fact that like that means Vader is her dad, and realizing like he stood beside me as he blew up my entire family.
Yeah,
and like that my whole planet. I've witnessed him kill my friends. I witnessed him like freeze my boyfriend. Basically, like kind of just seeing her process like, oh, like the man I've been spending my life fighting against is my dad. Like it makes sense how she's like, I need some time alone.
Get over it.
All right. Anyway.
Yeah, I think there's something, I feel like maybe Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher are like a little bit less good in this one.
Interesting.
Because there are some parts where like I feel like they're both putting a lot of sauce on it, and I can tell. Like,
yeah,
I feel like you took that like I said they're bad.
Well, you said they're worse.
I said a little bit less good.
Oh, okay. Fair. Okay.
Like it's like they were an 8, they're maybe a 7 in this one.
Sure.
Where there's just some scenes where I'm like, oh, their face is like doing something weird, or like there's like
I do feel like
stretches.
they're a little bit more like, I guess, melodramatic a little bit with it.
But also like, I noticed there was like a long stretch where Luke just didn't blink. Like there were just massive takes where he's just staring, just like this, and it's like not even.
I'm endangering the
serious.
mission. I shouldn't have come.
Yeah, and it's just like,
yeah.
What? I understand he's like worried or whatever, but I don't think the way to express worry is to absolutely dry your eyes out so like they're little raisins.
I do think that a little bit, I wish there was a little bit more of that like boyish charm still in the Luke character. Mm-hmm. At this point, he's kind of at the point where he's like fully matured into like Jedi Knight warrior leader, kind of like wise.
But who's
whatever.
He leading? They're all dead.
Yeah. Like, but like when he's talking to Yoda and Yoda's dying, he's like, dude, you gotta check all the time.
I kind of. What if they're not working?
Well, the last time it wasn't working, you just were like, well. So like, if we're gonna leave him anyway.
Just keep talking.
All right, sorry, I am talking, fucker. Scumbag.
That's rude.
But like even when he's talking to Yoda, like his reaction to Yoda being like your father he is just to kind of like have a blank face and be very serious. I don't think he's like acting bad. It's like a reasonable reaction, but a part of me is like, I wish there was a little bit more of like the boyish immaturity where he'd be like, I don't know, a little bit more like
emotional.
Reactionary about it.
A little less like stone faced and a little bit more like what?
Yeah,
like
I agree. That's I feel like that's fair criticism.
And the blinking thing did just like throw me off.
That's okay.
Where I was just like, brother, like why are you not blinking? Like,
yeah,
just do it. And then it would cut away, and I'd be like, okay, let's look in this one. Is he blinking? No,
yeah,
he doesn't blink once. It is just. It's not like gonna make the movie go to the bottom of the list, but I'm just like,
it's just a thing that's
just a weird choice.
Fair. I do kind of understand as well. Leia is like a little bit more like, she's very soft throughout the whole movie. Aside from like her like badass like opening where she's like dressed as a bounty hunter, which is really cool. Like aside from that, she's very like soft spoken kind of the whole movie. And it's like, what happened to like somebody's got to save our skins from like the first one? And like, yeah, there's been development, but it's like I kind of wish there were like still little sparks of, which kind of shows you just how insanely good Harrison Ford is. Because like Han to me is like just as good in this movie.
Yeah.
Obviously, like he's he's a little bit different than he was in the last one, but like he's still Han, in like all the best ways.
And he can drive a car like no one.
Yeah.
Like no one else. I guess I could say. He actually makes that noise when he sleeps. It's kind of fucked up. It's pretty scary, honestly. Can I ask you some questions?
You can ask me some questions.
Hold on, let me get to my questions.
Oh, actually, one last thing.
Yep.
The Rancor looks so good. It's insane how good that effect
What is that?
looks. The creature that Jabba tries to get to kill Luke. And also Jabba looks so good. Jabba required like 5 or 6 people to puppeteer
so
him.
big.
And like seeing him after seeing the shitty CG Jabba in A New Hope, it's like he looks so good in this.
Yeah.
It's just awesome. And like honestly, almost all the creatures in Jabba's palace. Did the version you watch have the musical number in there? Yeah. Here's the thing. I think the musical number is a silly inclusion. It's a banger, though.
I guess.
You know? That's Joe Yowza and Cy Snoodles from the Max Rebo band.
That was Joe Yowza and Cy Snoodles. There's traffic on the 404 today.
There's traffic in the Elenium system.
Why doesn't a Jedi just bring a bunch of lightsabers to drop them down like holes and drop them on stuff? Like, couldn't you just drop a lightsaber in the Sarlacc pit and then he's dead and then force? Maybe you could just
What's
force
prompting
it out.
this?
Is
it the Vader lightsaber throw?
No,
Okay.
I was just watching it and I was like, why are they so scared? Just like throw it down at that little freak. And
Well,
then it'll
you do
cut
have to
through him.
use the Force to keep the button held down, apparently, or something.
And
Or maybe
what about
that's not
tape?
even true.
Have we heard of tape?
I don't know if tape exists. It definitely
yeah.
does.
I was just kind of like, it's one of those like cinema sins, you know? I love those guys.
I hate that.
I
hate
love
that you
those
said
guys.
that. What did you think of Boba Fett's death?
Where he just goes into the Sarlacc pit?
Where he's like so cool and then he just falls in the Sarlacc pit. Like, did you care?
No, I'm not one of these people who looked at Boba Fett and was like, that guy's cool. I need to know who that guy is. I was kind of like, seems like a fucking little baby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say just seems like a cool guy, but I don't really care. But
Yeah.
he
I
seems
was just
like
like, oh, he's going to die. Okay. It's one of these things where it's like trying to detach myself from it. It's not a character I would care about.
well, within
but then-
canon, he's come back.
Yeah. And then knowing like what happens with him and knowing that people like think he's the coolest guy ever.
Yeah. I understand why
like-
people saw Empire and were like, that's a cool character. But
Yeah.
like, I don't really understand the outrage of like, wait, he just died? And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, like Luke kills like 100 fuckers in this movie.
Yeah, it's like not a big deal.
Yeah.
I think more the problem people have is with how he died, that he kind of died because Han accidentally hit him and like he goes out kind of like
But he's not like, it's
goober.
like he did something cool at all.
No,
in
he just
the
stands
movie.
and looks cool.
Yeah, it's not like he's like the biggest badass in the universe.
Yeah.
He's just kind of like a guy with a ship and a hat.
If anything, like I honestly prefer almost any of the other bounty hunters that were like lined up with him in Empire
Yeah.
Strikes Back, which we didn't even mention in that
That's
episode.
true.
But like Bosk, Dengar, Zuckuss,
Of course.
Forlom, IG-88.
Is IG-88 in Mandalorian?
No, that's IG-11. That's a different
Of
character.
course. Sorry.
It's all good.
Favorite lightsaber fight over these 3 movies?
I mean, I feel like for me, it's got to be the Vader versus Luke in this one. I just
Okay.
feel like it's like so emotional and kind of raw, and it's like not slow. It's like very quick. It feels like they're both pulling out tricks. Like I really love the Empire lightsaber battle as well, but it kind of, like we talked about, just feels like Vader's toying with him the whole time. And Luke's kind of just like doing his best to keep up. Whereas in this, it's like Luke also has tricks up his sleeve. Vader, I think, still has the upper hand for the most part until Luke kind of like loses control of himself for a minute. But like that's also kind of why I love that bit, is because people talk about how like the Jedi as a whole, like the ideal Jedi doesn't fully shut out any sort of like temptation or emotion or anything like the Jedi teach in like the prequels and shit. And even like Luke or even like Yoda and Obi-Wan are saying in this one, is they're like, you can't let your emotions take control, but also you have to kill this guy. But like the balance really is Luke being like using his emotion to like get the upper hand in a way. Not that it was intentional, but he's like letting himself be emotional, but like then he's like tempering it and being like, no, I'm not gonna like go the next step or whatever. Anyway,
Yeah.
what about you?
I think it's probably the Empire one. I kind of like seeing him like go in there and like think he's doing well, but then clearly not.
And then kind of just get fucked
be doing
up.
well. Yeah. And I also think it's like, I think the Obi-Wan and Vader one is good for that movie.
Yeah.
But the Empire one is when they like figured out how to do a lightsaber fight, I guess.
Yeah.
Because Obi-Wan and Vader are very like slow, standing, like, and using the swords in a way.
There's more like fencing kind of.
Yeah. It's like the one thing about lightsabers is they don't have like a guard on them. Mm-hmm. So I'm always like, it's a bad idea to just hold them together. Because one of the guys could slide down and like cut your hands or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Which like they have done in like films, but then usually the person who is getting it slid down, then they just like do a little move around or something. But
and it's like, I'm not saying, it just like that feels very different from what lightsaber fights become in this original trilogy. Where they're like more emotional, more aggressive, and more like battles than like chess.
yeah, the Obi-Wan Vader one is very much like they're getting a job done, whereas like both of the Luke Vader fights are like there's so much context behind them. Like yeah, there's context behind the like Vader Obi-Wan one, but that's like learned later.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really apply as much.
Yeah. And there's
Whereas,
just so much more weight.
yeah.
Yeah.
And which like kind of makes me like I honestly think that the Luke Vader fight in Return of the Jedi is like the ideal fight, where it's like it's not slow, but it's also not like so fast that it doesn't look real. There's like a lot of emotion behind it. Like it's not like the most clean swings or anything. They're kind of just like swinging at each other and like blocking once in a while. Anyway, so that's my ranking.
Okay. Nice. Favorite planet from the original 3.
I mean, Bespin I do love. Cloud City's very cool. But I think also Dagobah is also up there.
I think mine's Hoth.
That's fair.
I just think it's sick.
Yeah. I also love in Hoth, like on Hoth, the idea that like it's like livable. You can like be there, but like once it becomes nighttime, you'll literally die out there.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
Who's the MVP of the original trilogy for you?
I mean, it's got to be Han. I feel like Han is just like such an iconic character. Like, you mean MVP of like just best character, or MVP of like who does the best?
No, best character.
I mean, I think it's Han. I feel like he's just kind of like a perfect type of character where like you love him, you hate him. He's got a lot of flaws that he like overcomes, but he doesn't lose his character in doing so. And like the actor portraying him is absolutely perfect for the role, and I truly don't think anyone else could do that.
Not even Alden?
No. I think Alden does fine, but I think he's also in a way playing a different character. Yeah. But like I truly think there's no one who could do what Harrison Ford is doing, because he's really in a way just being himself. Like, I think that's part of what makes the main 3 characters here so good, is in a way they're kind of just being themselves. Like, you watch interviews with Mark Hamill, he's very Luke-like. You watch Carrie Fisher interviews, she's like very Leia-like, a little bit more like wild. But like they're all kind of just being a version of themselves, and I think that is especially prevalent with Han. You?
I don't know. I think
I'm also going to give a shout out to Yoda, because obviously he's just like incredible.
I think it's probably Han for me as well.
Yeah.
Because he is like he's like the most fun character. I think he is the one that you can kind of like relate to a little bit more than the other ones. Like in ways you can relate to Luke and Leia, but like Han is just a guy, really.
You know what I think it is a little bit? I think that in A New Hope, like you're kind of meant to relate to Luke because he's just like a young guy looking for adventure. He doesn't really know his place, and he's kind of like discovering the truths of the galaxy as you are as a viewer. Then in Empire, like you can still relate to Luke a bit because he's like discovering himself, but for the most part in that movie, like you're with like Han and Leia, and it's like you really attach yourself to Han in that movie. In this movie, like Luke has kind of like for the most part fully developed, so there's not, and he's like this mystical like warrior, so like it's kind of hard to relate to him directly. Han like has kind of overcome most of his like problems, so like I think is still relatable as a character, but like he's very much more like a leader and like a general than he is like a scoundrel or whatever. And then Leia, honestly, I wish Leia had a bit more to do in this movie. I do think the scene of her meeting Wicket the first time, the Ewok, when he's like thinks she's a threat, but then she's like, here, have a little cracker, and he's like and like eats it up and then like hits the scout trooper. Like I love that scene, and I think she's kind of perfect for that. And also Warwick Davis, who played Wicket, has come out and said that like Carrie Fisher was like very, very kind to him because they spent a lot of time shooting together, because he was like 9 years old or like 11 years old when when they recorded this. He's like very young. There's a great picture somewhere because he didn't just play Wicket. He also played like someone in Jabba's palace or something. So there's a great picture of Carrie Fisher and Warwick Davis on the set of the sail barge where like he's sitting on her lap or something. And it's just like, apparently she was like really good and made a point to like make sure that he was okay and make sure that he was like taken care of, because it was like one of his first big movies.
Yeah, he was like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was like a little
crazy.
Kid. Yeah. Which like kind of makes me go like, man, what a great performance. I know he's in a little teddy bear costume, but like it's so good. The way he like jumps his butt down to sit on the log and stuff. I don't know. So good.
Some of these like newer posters for these movies are so bad.
Yeah, a lot of like the Blu-ray and DVD posters are kind of shit, I think.
How is that possible? There's some things that are just seem impossible.
Especially since the original posters for these movies are so good.
Yeah.
It's like, just do those, guys.
Anyway.
But anyway, yeah, I do think that Leia kind of takes the biggest hit as far as like character content in this movie, which is kind of a bummer. Like on Jabba's sail barge, she has the awesome moment where she's like undercover as a bounty hunter, but as soon as she's uncovered, it's like, all right, throw her in a bikini. Then they get off of there and they do the Endor mission where she's kind of just like
there
put aside for a bit because she goes with Wicket to the whatever, and then in the final bits she's still not doing much, and it's like, I wish she had more. I know the focus is mostly on Luke and Vader, but like
she's related.
Yeah.
How are you feeling going into the prequels in a couple weeks?
I'm excited because I do think the prequels are like a fun watch. Whether you think they're good or bad, I think they're like fun to consume.
Sure.
But
see.
I am a little bit scared, and honestly kind of just like, I have no idea how this is going to go. Like, I feel like, because I'm not necessarily someone who's going to be like, we got to put Revenge of the Sith at number 3, right?
Yeah.
But I am probably going to, like, vouch for these movies more than you will. I am curious to see if you're like, there's, like, big problems with the movie, but they're enjoyable, or if you're going to be like, God, buddy, these are bad. So, like, I'm excited. I'm nervous. I think it'll be fun, though.
And
Rank
now,
time.
Well, let me take a little look, okay?
Yeah, you got to start off here.
Let me just kind of see what I'm feeling here.
I'm scared.
45.
Fucking hell. Is that actually your answer?
No,
okay.
I was kidding.
Because I was like, that's not so low that I'm like, that's obviously a joke.
I think like around Barbie 22.
Yikes.
I don't like it better than Silence. I don't like it better than Close Encounters. Iron Giant, Game Night, Elf, The Thing, like.
Can I tell you where I was going to pitch it? Because, like.
You're going to do 10?
What?
Or were you going to say 10?
No.
Oh.
Like, I kind of like this movie better than Empire Strikes Back, but, like, Empire Strikes Back is, like, obviously better. So, like, I'm not trying to get it that high. But I do, like, very much like this movie better than A New Hope. So, like, my initial pitch is going to be at 7, right above A New Hope, and below The Incredibles. I know you're not doing that. Because, like, I'm like, to me, Return of the Jedi is better than A New Hope. Like, it's like A New Hope is, like, a little more surface level, not empty, but, like, there's less there than there is in this movie. So that's, like, why.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my subjective placement. You said your subjective placement, which was what, Barbie area?
Yeah. Because here's the thing. I understand the A New Hope thing, like why you would like it better. But if you're just, like, if a caveman
Sure.
was just given this movie to watch, I don't think it would be very good. Right?
Sure.
Whereas, like, A New Hope and Empire, to an extent, can live on their own. This movie is kind of like...
I feel like this movie can live on its own basically just as much as Empire. And I feel like it's kind of tough to, like, criticize a movie for being a sequel.
I guess, but also that's something that we've, like...
Well, we haven't really done many sequels.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't, like, I don't know. Like, we didn't talk about with, like, Too Fast, Too Furious, like, we don't really know who they're talking about when he's talking about letting a guy go, because they're talking about Dom, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like, we haven't really, like, knocked a sequel for being a sequel before, is what I'm saying.
I understand that, but also, like, we kind of have.
When?
In a way. Because with the... Number one, the Too Fast and Furiouses are low, right? Like, Too Fast and Tokyo Drift are low. So
Sure.
It's not like we're like, oh, they're sequels, they're stupid, they're bad. Yeah.
No, they're just lower because they're worse movies.
Yeah.
Than the
So, like,
first
when
one.
we're splitting hairs between, like, if I'm going to watch A New Hope or Return versus any of these other movies, I'm kind of like, I don't want to just watch Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, but I feel like
ever.
that's, like, not really a fair, like, way to decide how good it is as a movie when you're, like, it is meant to be part of...
Okay, so Han and Leia
Yeah,
don't really do anything.
sure.
So you've got two characters in the movie that you're...
I don't know if they don't do anything, but, like...
What do? They meet the Ewoks.
I mean, you're skipping half the film by saying they meet the Ewoks.
Okay, so Leia goes in as a little bounty hunter. About 15 minutes in, she gets captured. She's on the ship. Han is in carbonite until they get him out, like, 15 minutes in, right? Then they leave. They basically go to Endor. Like, I'm skipping stuff, obviously.
Sure.
But they go to Endor. They're with the Ewoks, and they, like, kind of fuck around with the shield generator for a while. They kind of ride speeders around, but, like, until they actually are interacting with the shield generator, which is, like, the last third of the movie, they haven't really done anything. They've taken out a couple scout troopers and partied with some Ewoks.
Yeah, but I guess, like, most of what they've done up to that point is, like, just like dialogue talking and stuff. But like it's not bad. It's not like it's like they're not doing anything.
But if you're watching it and you're like, okay, these two characters in this movie.
I want to make it clear. I wasn't like refuting like your argument. I was saying like I think that being like, yeah, but if you watched a sequel of a trilogy on its own, you're not going to know what's going on. Isn't like a great critique when it comes to like judging on a list how good the movie is. That's what I was saying.
But I'm telling you, in some parts of this movie just don't work because it relies on you having seen the other ones.
Yeah, because it's the third movie.
I know, but Han and Leia are like not really characters. There's some character moments, but like they don't really do much of anything. There's like not a lot of there's not a lot of things that they're doing where you're just like, oh, that's like cool and interesting and fun. For me.
Sure, yeah, you could say for you, yeah.
Yeah. Then you mix that with the sort of like poor direction of a lot of these things. I know you say some of it still looks good. There's a lot of things that I think look quite bad, quite surprisingly bad. All like the older stuff, where it's just like a lot of stuff feels like a bit of a step down. Is
it just the speeder bike stuff, or is there's
some matte paintings and like some compositing of people into these like matte paintings where I'm just like, I don't know how it looks worse because none of them have looked this bad before. Where I'm just kind of like, okay, it's just not what I expect from Star Wars. It feels like a step down. And then also the thread of the movie, like purely plot wise, is the same thing as the first one. So it's just kind of like, it's the Death Star.
Yeah, I know there's a Death Star, but I don't think the plot is the same.
What do you mean?
Like in I feel like the plot of A New Hope is not the same as the plot of Return of the Jedi just because both have a Death Star in them.
I mean, the plot of the movie is we have to destroy the Death Star.
Not really. The Death Star's kind of just there.
So they
and
don't
it's like
need
a
to
thing that
destroy
they're doing. But like,
yeah,
the
but
plot of A New Hope is like Luke being thrust into this adventure and like meeting like this group of people along the way, and then like it ultimately ends with like the task of the movie is destroy the Death Star. In this, like really the task of the movie is like Luke confronting Vader. Like that's really what it's about. Yeah,
well, that's like the story of the movie though. That's like what the characters are doing in the journeys. They literally like, you just have to blow up this thing again. Like there's nothing about it.
I do think that's a reasonable critique. I just don't think it's the same plot as A New Hope. I think that like, yeah, they're using a similar set piece, but I think that's different. Personally. Let's just agree to disagree. Put it at number 2.
At number 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Oh, he agreed to it. Oh, he said it's ridiculous. Never mind. By the way, I'm not fighting to put it at 7. I'm saying that's my subjective thing. We got to put it somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just like,
you're angry. It's okay.
There's nothing about this movie that gives me a sense of wonder that the other ones do, or a sense of excitement like the other ones do.
Interesting.
And I know you like this one a lot.
I'm not saying this because I think that only I disagree with this. I feel like others would probably disagree with this. Some of this.
I think others would probably say Tokyo Drift is the best Fast and Furious.
That's fair. I just said that because you keep being like, I know you like Star Wars.
Well, I'm only talking to you.
What?
I'm only talking to you.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's just like,
we got to figure out where in the middle we're putting it. Like I understand every criticism you're having right now.
Okay.
I'm just like, when you say them, I feel the need to be like, and this is why I disagree with it, which it's kind of just creating a, like, you're not going to put it at 7. I'm not going to put it at 22. Like,
well, we'll see.
So like, whereabouts in the middle should we put it? He's putting it. Are you actually putting it at 22? No. Okay. I was like, what the fuck?
I don't know. The Harry Potter thing is rough.
Yeah, Harry Potter is kind of like right in the middle of where we each want to put him.
It's better than Harry Potter for sure, but there's other things around Harry Potter that it's not as good as.
Like what?
The Thing.
Bold.
That's a bold thing to say.
I don't know what you think I said.
Bold.
Yeah.
Is it better than Black Klansman? No. Is it better than Surf's Up? Maybe.
That's rude. You like that movie, fucker.
Is it better than Harry Potter? Most definitely, actually.
What would your thoughts be on putting it between Surf's Up and Harry Potter?
I guess that's fine.
Like, that's almost right in the middle of the two things we said.
Yeah, it is.
You also need to keep in mind that almost none of the next Star Wars movies, I'm not just talking about the next 3, but almost none of the remaining Star Wars movies are going that high.
I know. But it is just like an area of the list where like every time I'm looking at it, I'm going to be like, yeah. There's movies.
What, just because of Harry Potter and Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, because I'm just going to be like, most movies I like more than those ones.
That's fair. To be honest, like I have some of those as well. And I have some where I'm like, that movie should be way higher.
Yeah.
But like, that's kind of just,
That's just the nature of it. This is going to be 14 and 15 are going to be Adam's loves.
Well, 13, 14, and 15, yeah.
I guess. I like Surf's Up, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure in that episode when I was like, I was thinking 10, you were like, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Or at the time. Yeah, because we put it at 10 at the time, but it is no longer there, obviously.
Yeah, now it's 13. Harry Potter's 15, and Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, is number 14.
I feel okay about that. I know you're kind of like...
I might be hanging by the end of the night.
Well, I won't be here, so that's okay.
Yeah. I'll write your name on the note.
Wowzers. So there it is. I don't know what that means. Yeah, that's it. I feel like we're in a weird place right now just because like I feel like we were both kind of just saying how we felt about the movie over and over, and we both thought the other person was like trying to like argue us, but we were
you were.
I
think we've spent a little too much time doing this together. Like, just 6 in a row is just a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. For context, Calder and I have recorded the last 6 episodes in less than 48 hours, right?
Yeah.
So that's wacky.
Yeah, that's a lot. But we got it done.
Yep.
And they're all the next one is always as good as the last.
That's true. We've never had a single bad episode. We've never had a single Barbie episode.
Next week is Dune Part 1, the Denis Villeneuve film.
Oh, fuck. I forgot that's what we're doing. I'm excited.
Dune.
And
that kicks off Calder's month.
Caldy's month.
Where it's Dune Part 1, Dune Part 2, which will be in theaters by then. Then I've kind of got a mystery space in there as the third week, and then we've got the history of the Seattle Mariners on the Secret Base YouTube channel.
Yeah,
which is one of my favorite YouTube videos of all time. So those are all long. So start watching them.
Fucking. At least I don't have to watch 6 movies for next time.
Relax.
Oh, relax.
Well, we're gonna do the comedy break after that as well.
We're going to do it in the same recording session?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind then. We will be doing 6. You guys don't care because you listen to them all the same. Like it's not going to affect the listening experience is what I'm saying. You're just looking at me so that I defend myself, even though there's literally nothing wrong.
Well, because you're like, it doesn't matter. You're going to listen to them all the same. And then you looked at me and you were like, I need to justify that somehow.
Because you left a silence and were just staring at me, no blinks.
And you left silence out of your calculations when
so that's
Return of the Jedi on the list.
All right, so that's Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi at 14 on the list, below Surf's Up, above Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Yeah. So let's do a quick rundown of like this last little trilogy or duo trilogy. So Empire Strikes Back went at 1, A New Hope went at 7. Return of the Jedi went at 14. The Fast and the Furious went at 29. Too Fast, Too Furious went at 42, and Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift went at 43. This seems like I steamrolled, but we really are starting with my best and kind of starting with your worst for the most part.
Yeah.
So that will absolutely shift. So
yeah, by the time we're done this is gonna be.
There's going to be 14 Fast and Furious movies at the very top of the list.
And when Dominic Toretto releases Fast 11, that's when I'm going to be really in my zone.
When are they doing that?
Either this year or next year, or maybe never. I don't know. It's really one of those things that I don't want to think about too long, or else I'll find sadness again.
Thanks everybody for listening to this episode. We love you and we appreciate you. Let us know what you thought in the YouTube comments if you want, if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, you can answer the little question blurb that's there, and either we'll read those on the pod or not. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. We love you very much. Bye, guys.
Bye.